Good morning. My name is Gerald Williams. I'm a partner in a law firm of Williams Cedar here in Philadelphia and in New Jersey. We're here to talk to you about a lawsuit we filed this morning against the Archdiocese of Allentown, the Diocese of Allentown, and some others. But first, I want to introduce to you the other lawyers who are here with me. We are working together with these attorneys for survivors of clergy abuse in a number of states across the East, including Pennsylvania, New York, and New Jersey. So to my immediate left is Michelle Simpson-Teagle of Dallas, Texas. And to her left is Mohammed Aziz of the law firm of Abraham, Watkins, Nichols, Soretto, Augusto, and Aziz in Houston, Texas. The lawsuit we filed this morning in Lehigh County is, to the best of our knowledge, the first to be filed seeking monetary damages arising from facts that were outlined in the Pennsylvania Attorney General's grand jury report in August of this year. We've sued the diocese, its present bishop, and its immediate past bishop, as well as the perpetrator, a priest whose name is Bruno Tucci, who I'll talk about briefly in a second, and an organization of religious order from Missouri known as the Congregation of Servants of the Paraclete. Bruno Tucci's story is one of the worst outlined by the grand jury report in August for a whole number of reasons. But in the context of our case, he admitted to improperly touching a young boy in the year 1991. He admitted that to diocesan officials then. The diocese did worse than nothing in that case. They sent him to a facility run by the Congregation of the Servants of the Paraclete, which was not a professional therapy organization, which was not capable of dealing with pedophiles like Tucci, and which, after a number of months, returned him to the diocese, which amazingly, in 1992, put him back into the same parish where he had been and where he had admitted molesting an altar boy. Over the course of the years, it's doubtless that he molested other children. It ended, or so far as we know, one of the last victims was our client, whom he molested in the year 2001 and 2002. That's a full decade after he had already admitted improperly touching children. He was kept in that ministry by the diocese. So this is a case that's not just about a child abuser, it's about an organization that for its own purposes, as we've alleged in the complaint, kept the abuser in an active ministry and kept him in close contact with our children, including our client. Now you'll notice that this case is filed under the name John Doe. We will be filing a motion with the court to permit us to file the complaint with our client's actual name under seal, and that is to protect our client's confidentiality and privacy. I can tell you he is a broken young man. He veers from despair to anger to depression over his experience. And he has had a short but painful life experience because of the abuse he suffered at the hands of Tucci. Now, it took an immense amount of courage for him to bring this case, and he is bringing it not just to seek compensation and vindication on his own, but also because he is one of the few surviving victims who is within the current statute of limitations as the Pennsylvania legislature continues, frankly, to dawdle about opening a window to the thousands, possibly, of victims of priests in dioceses throughout Philadelphia. That is a statute that needs to be revised. We hope it will. But if it won't, this case and the subpoena power that it brings to us will allow us to open the door to facts and the truth of what happened, not just in this diocese, the Diocese of Allentown, but throughout all the dioceses that were the subject of the grand jury report in August of this year. That's something we want not just for our client, and something that not just our client wants for himself, but for all the victims of this decades-long series of abuse. Michelle and Mo will talk to you briefly now, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
My name is Michelle Simpson-Teagle, and I'm another member of the legal team who's representing some of the survivors of clergy abuse, both in Pennsylvania and a number of other states. One of my roles on the legal team, and really it is an honor, is that I spend a lot of time communicating with our clients. That also means that I have seen the destruction that this abuse has done in our clients' lives. I have seen the shame and the courage that it took for this client to come forward to even lawyers to bring this claim. And I've seen the anger that this client has, that there are all of these other survivors who will not have the opportunity that he has to seek justice and answers and compensation for what happened to him because of the state of the law in Pennsylvania. And I know that he wants to see that change so other people can do what he's doing. A hard thing, but an important thing. One of the things I want to address is the Victims' Compensation Fund and the statute that we hope does change, and that our client in this case hopes change. You know, it's really unfortunate that he is 29 years old, and if he were just a few years older, we wouldn't be filing this lawsuit without a change in the law. That seems unfair and unjust, that someone who experiences the same kind of pain and abuse doesn't get to have their day in court. And the church's recent suggestion or offer to create these funds really, to us and to our client, seem like a way to continue to keep things in the darkness. And you know, there's one solution to that, and that is to bring it into the light, and that light is the greatest disinfectant, to expose what had happened and to try to prevent it in the future so other clients don't have to go through what this young man went through. And so, you know, it is an important piece of this case that he is going to be one of the first who has the subpoena power, and we have the ability to start seeking those answers through the courts, and that's really important to our client, not just about compensation, but about finding out who is responsible, what was missed. We know some of that already. We know they knew this for 10 years, that this abuser had admitted he abused someone 10 years before our client was ever in that church, that this abuser was abusing children before our client was ever born. But, you know, other clients need answers too, and we hope that the law will change, and I think that'll bring healing not only to our client, but to a lot of other survivors in this state.
Good afternoon. My name is Muhammad Aziz. I'm an attorney from Houston, Texas, that has the honor of working with this fine team of lawyers and also representing these very fine clients. You know, on the way here last night, I was reading the grand jury report again, and once again, I could not believe what I was reading in there. I do want to thank the people, the citizens on the grand jury that took the time and effort to put together that document. If you haven't read that document, you need to read it, because at first it seems like you are reading something that's made up of fiction. This one, Mr. Tucci, for example, as Jerry said, was a known child molester for over a decade, and was able to molest our client because he was allowed to be in that position by his employers. How does that even happen? How can you let somebody who is an admitted child molester be around other children? To me, it's unfathomable. What this case allows us to do is to start the discovery process and to start taking depositions and asking these people under oath why they did it and why these people weren't stopped. Why was Tucci not stopped? I don't understand that. I think our clients deserve to know the answer to those questions. And under the current state of the law, thousands of victims will not have that same opportunity. They will not have their day in court. They will not have an opportunity to confront their molesters. The criminal statute has run, so Mr. Tucci is not in jail where he belongs. At least we can get him to answer some questions for us, some hard questions as to why he did this. And again, thank you all for being here. Proud to represent these clients, proud to work with these fine lawyers. Thank you.
Peter, I think what prompted our client to come forward was the grand jury report. It took him a long time to wrestle with it himself, but when he saw that the report included the Diocese of Allentown, he just decided he had to do something. And you know, I can tell you, you know, we're in close contact with our client. To this day, it's still very hard for him to even think about talking about this experience, but it's because of that report and because he knew that there were many, many other victims. Sorry. Don't be sorry. Many other victims that he came forward.
Do you anticipate more names being added?
Well, to this complaint, probably not, just because of the way the procedure works, but we do anticipate other lawsuits. We do anticipate other people coming forward. As Michelle said, many of our current clients are right now beyond the statute of limitations, and we have to determine, at least superficially, they're beyond the statute of limitations, and we have to determine from case to case which ones can be brought now and which ones need to wait for the law to be changed.
Mr. Williams, I'd like to get your take, if you don't mind, on the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, Allentown, and the other dioceses setting up that victims' compensation fund, because obviously critics are saying the payouts could be much higher in civil.
Right, and we are on the critic side of that argument, and for some pretty obvious reasons. Look, it's a good first step that these churches are acknowledging, or the dioceses are acknowledging some responsibility for these things. But as Michelle also said, these funds, and they've been in operation in other areas, these funds tend to operate as furtherances of keeping things in the dark. And it's really like having the perpetrator of a wrong decide what should happen to the perpetrator. The church wants to set its own parameters for what its liability is, and we think that's wrong. Look, if it turns out that that's the last and only remedy for our clients, we will help them pursue that. But we don't think it should be the last remedy. We think the legislature should do what the vast majority of the members of the General Assembly wanted to do, which is to vote on an expansion of the statute of limitations, put that bill on the floor.
I'd like to also ask if you could walk us through how your client fits into the statute.
Yes, yes, that's a good question. The state of Pennsylvania did change the statute of limitations for sex abuse victims back in 2002. And the change was essentially this. If a person had a claim that was alive as of 2002, then the time for them to bring the claim would be expanded until they were 30 years of age. Our client, who was abused in 2001 and who was a minor at that time, had a claim that would have been alive under the old statute of limitations. But with the change in 2002, since he is not yet 30, he is within the statute of limitations.
So he would have timed out at 30?
He would have timed out in another year, yes.
What was the law before the 2002?
The law before the 2002 change was that for any type of claim, and this is still the law for most claims, a minor who is injured had to bring a lawsuit within 2 years of his or her 18th birthday. And I'm old enough to remember when they didn't even have that time. It was 2 years from when they were hurt. Their parents had to bring a case.
On Wednesday, a good majority of the survivors that appeared with the Attorney General are going to be back in Harrisburg for the last day of the session.
Yes.
Do you have any message for them or for legislators?
Well, the message for the victims and the survivors is thank you. They have, we all have, besides clients, we have friends who are survivors. I was raised a Catholic. I have 16 years of Catholic education, and I know that those people have suffered unbelievably for decades. So we thank them for bringing the fight out in the open. For the legislators, do your job. Do your job. The majority has already indicated that they will vote for this bill and that they believe in this bill and that this bill will serve the interests of justice. There's no excuse to wait.
Mr. Williams, do you have any idea, based on your knowledge, how many of the 1,000 or so victims over the last 70 years fall within the statute?
No, only a guess, Steve, and it would be a small minority of the survivors. Which is why it's so important for the statute to be changed.
Has your client met with law enforcement?
No. He's not. Tucci's activities were never reported to law enforcement, right. And until now, our client has not been able to bring his story out.
So it was only when Mr. Tucci was among the 300 priests named that your client came forward, was obviously.
Yes.
And Mr. Aziz was talking about timelines. So what do you figure as far as bringing this suit?
I'm sorry, sir.
What's the timeline for bringing this suit and what will happen?
Oh, well, the timeline, of course, is it takes like 4 to tango in lawsuits. We have filed the lawsuit. The timeline depends a lot on the other side, but also on the court itself. In Lehigh County, we anticipate an early conference with the court, which will set a schedule. Typically, litigation like this in Lehigh County lasts between 1 year and 2 years, and during that time, the discovery takes place. The details of this particular case we can't speak to yet.
Is this Mr. Tucci still practicing priest, or is he too old?
No, he was laicized in the year 2002, and he was permitted by, well, I misspeak a little bit. He was permitted to retire from the priesthood in 2002. He was laicized. That's a process where the church officially defrocks a priest in the year 2007. Since then, he's been living a civilian life.
Can you explain, you said he admitted to the grand jury of abuse. Can you explain what type of abuse and what does that do for your client's case?
He did not admit to the grand jury. He did not testify before the grand jury. He admitted to diocesan officials in Allentown in 1991 when a victim came forward. Here's the story. This story is laid out in the complaint. In 1991, a victim of Tucci came forward and said he had been inappropriately touched by Tucci. Officials from the Chancery of Allentown visited Tucci, and Tucci said, yes, that's what happened. Tucci was then sent to the Congregation of the Servants of the Paraclete for several months. This was, you may have heard about this, this is a facility that was known as Camp Ped in Catholic circles in the 90s. It was an effort, it was a vessel for dioceses to recycle abusing priests back into the ministry. They provided no real treatment for pedophilia whatsoever. And then he was returned. In 1993, 2 years after the first victim came forward, the same victim saw Tucci in active ministry as a priest. And then he went to the diocese again to express his outrage. And nothing happened. Tucci remained in the same diocese, in the same parishes for the rest of his career, and in one of those parishes he encountered our client and abused him.
The admission is on record?
The admission is described in the grand jury, and it is undoubtedly on record with the diocese. It's a record we haven't seen, but it is a record we will be getting.
Can you describe how you believe the congregation, the that servants in Paraclete are potentially liable?
Yeah. The congregation began primarily to help priests with alcohol problems. It started in the 60s, I believe. And it was essentially a 12-step program, and it was, so far as we can tell, pretty effective in treating priests who had struggles with alcoholism. However, it had no experience or ability to treat pedophilia. But in the 80s and 90s, dioceses from all across the country, not just Pennsylvania and not just Allentown, began using that facility to send priests quietly to be rehabilitated for improper attraction to children, improper contact with children, and the kinds of things that ended up in this widespread scandal. But they did not receive any real treatment. Some people have observed that New Mexico, which is where this facility was, in the Diocese of Santa Fe, actually it was in the epicenter of child abuse in the 90s, because many of these priests were permitted to minister in parishes local to the facility. So we believe the congregation, the facility doesn't exist anymore, the congregation does. And we believe the congregation is liable for negligence because it returned, frankly, pedophiles to places where they were in contact with children. And they facilitated what was a really kind of despicable cover-up by the diocese.
I have a question for Michelle. Michelle, can you please tell us why the victims do not come forward right after they've been abused?
Sure. I mean, we've seen this with a lot of the survivors that we've represented in sexual abuse cases, in that sometimes their brain blocks it out and they don't even realize what has occurred, especially when they're children. And then there's shame, especially with the abuse within the church. I know, having talked to a lot of the survivors, many of our clients are males, that the Me Too movement has been an incredible thing, and we are grateful for it. It has also, in some ways, I think, made it hard for a lot of the male survivors to feel like they have a voice and a place. And to that, I would say, to those clients who I've been sitting with and having these conversations, that you are not alone and that you have nothing to be ashamed of. You did nothing wrong. You have a right to answers. And we hope that those clients, the clients who are within the statute and the clients who aren't, will eventually get that.